Dear candidates and dear students and every participant, welcome to class. Today, our focus is on the characteristics of social change. Recall that in the last class, we have defined social change as alterations that go on in social structure, social elements, alterations in social arrangements. We were able to highlight and list the social values and other elements that make up social elements and social arrangements. Now, we were going to discuss the characteristics of social change. Social change has some characteristics that distinguishes them from some other forms of social events. Of course, social change is not the only thing that is happening in the society. There are other things that happen in society, even though they may be anchored by social change. But then, within the context of this lecture, we will be considering four main characteristics of social change. Please, class, you advise also to, on your own, do a little bit of reading up. These four characteristics of social change that we are going to discuss are not the only characteristics of social change, but we cannot exhaust social change characteristics. So we're giving you just a tip of hoping that you'll be able to get as many more as possible. Now, the first characteristic of social change that we want to consider in this class is that social change occurs everywhere. Social change occurs everywhere. There is no society that would say that they are free from social change. It occurs naturally everywhere in every human society. There's no human society that is static. There must be social, political, economic, and cultural interplays that will bring change. But then, even when social change occurs everywhere, it's important that you also note that the rate of change varies from time to time and from place to place. I hope we get this clear. That the rate of change, for instance, the rate of change in the UK, in Europe, may not be the same thing as the rate of change in Uganda, in Algeria. Yet, that does not mean that Uganda and Algeria are not experiencing social change. The only thing is that UK may be experiencing at a faster rate. That's when we discuss places. When we discuss time, you see that the rate of social change, the rate at which changes occurred in the 80s, it may not be the same rate at which is occurring now in the 21st century. You can agree with us that the 21st century change is faster because the global community is becoming smaller. There is greater level of interconnectivity and information sharing is nearly at its optimum when compared to the 80s and the 90s. So we expect also that in terms of time, um, the rate at which social change occur now is quite different from how it used to be. So note that characteristic that one, that it is natural, and that even in being natural, that the rate at which it occurs varies from time to time and from place to place. Secondly, we need to also highlight the fact that social change has this characteristic of being intentional sometimes, yet often is unplanned. The government may set out to do a project intentionally, but then within that project, there will be elements of social change that may likely come in, which are unplanned. There's this idea that we call project externalities. When you set out to do a given project, having certain targets, but by the time you end the project, you will now observe that there are other variables that you never considered in the project. Now, it happens also in social change. Let's take our university for instance. Formerly, by 2010, um, of course, we know around that period the university was gradually being conceived. But before then, around 1990, there was no such university as Alex Ekweme Federal University in Dufalike. Now, there was an intentional move to take off a university site here in our host community. But then this intentional move has also given rise to other unplanned changes. Take, for instance, you can be sure that the number of vehicular movements, the rate of vehicular movements in Ikko has increased, is an element of social change, but that is unplanned. I hope these explanations uh, would serve you well. Then, thirdly, social change often generates controversy. Social change will often generate controversy. What we're seeing in effect is that um, by reason of changes, people are bound to have arguments, disagreements, and quarrels. For instance, in the Western world, there is the increase in acceptance of homosexuals. That's an element of social change. But then in Africa, Nigeria, Uganda, and the rest of them, no matter irrespective of the effort that the Western world is making on these African nations to accept homosexuals, there has been so much controversy about it. So social change will always introduce controversy. When ATM machine came up newly, some persons wouldn't want it. When GSM access came up newly, some persons wouldn't want it. Then the fourth, which is also not the least, is that social change, social changes would matter more than others. What we are saying here is that the weight, certain social changes will carry more weight, carry heavier weight than others. For instance, when you introduce a university in a community, like the instance we have of AE the weight it brings, the matter it brings is much more heavier than when you introduce a GSM handset in the same community. So certain social changes would matter more than others. So please carefully note that the characteristics of social change that we discuss will include one, that social change often may be unplanned, yet the rates may vary from time to time, from place to place. We've agreed that social change can be to an extent, to a very far extent, intentional yet, but then bring about unplanned outcome. We've also agreed that social change can generate controversy. And finally, we say that social change can also bring different levels of weight upon the society. Thank you for your time. The next class will be discussing factors influencing acceptance or rejection of changes.